Hello and welcome back to the channel. Thank you for joining me for another of my interviews. Today, have you ever thought of going off-grid? Wouldn't that be nice to be away from all the complications, the utility bills, all the nonsense from the government and the council tax and all these sort of weird things that we live in, the stresses and all of that? Or would it be somewhat unnerving to be perhaps living away from everybody else? We're going to find out today with Simon, the Woodlander. He's got a YouTube channel, link will be in the description, and a Telegram channel. And he is off-grid, currently sitting in his cabin in the middle of some woods. Simon, thank you so much for joining me today.
Hello, Richard. How are you? And thank you very much for having me on.
It's lovely to have you on. Now, I know you said to me before we were recorded you would normally be sitting out there in the woods, but it's raining where you are.
It's just started. I've just spent the whole day clearing just under about a quarter of an acre for putting up some more polytunnels. And it's been a lovely day, but the rain has just started, so I'm inside in the cabin.
Fantastic. So I mentioned at the beginning living off grid, and you've done this in a very interesting way, because my immediate thought was, oh, how do you manage to do such a thing? Surely there's all these bylaws and regulations and statutes and acts and people coming around with clipboards and all that sort of stuff. But you surprised me not only on how much it costs to do it, but how actually little interference you've had.
Yeah, I didn't have very much interference at all. In fact, I'll tell you a story about the Forestry Commission in a minute. But I used something called the 4-year rule.
The 4-year rule.
The 4-year rule, and it's an English law, and it's very old, and it's very English if you think about it. And it simply states that if you build a home and you live in it for 4 years, and nobody's asked you to take it down or cease to live there, and when they say anybody, they mean the authorities, then it becomes immune from enforcement.
Wow.
Now, that's a very English way of looking at things, which is if you do something and nobody's bothered and nobody minds, then it's fine for you to do it.
Well, when you think back to the old days, you know, they used to say if you built a house within 24 hours,
smoke was coming out the chimney.
Smoke was coming out the chimney and all of that, and you think, wow, that's amazing. You could sort of put it on common land and all of that. Yeah. So in effect, this sort of law, okay, you've got 4 years, but you would think that in 4 years, somebody somewhere is going to go, hello, what's going on there then?
As I mentioned before, I mean, I didn't make a secret of what I was doing. Everybody I knew I'd bought this acreage of woodland, and I was building a cabin, and I didn't make a secret of it. And I continued. I didn't borrow thousands and thousands of pounds to do it. I built it out of what I had left at the end of the week. So I paid my normal bills, and if I had £100 left over, I went to the wood yard and bought £100 worth of wood and started to build. And I never once actually thought there was going to be any trouble, and there wasn't. And
that's incredible. I think most people would be falling off their seat thinking, what, in this day and age of regulations to breathe? It's amazing.
I mean, what gave me a little bit of hope was when we looked at this woodland, which is in a much larger wood, I'd already spotted about 3 little roofs in the distance, tucked away. And I thought, there's other people here with little cabins, and I can't see all of it. I can only see tiny little bits of it, so I didn't know what was going on. But if they could do it, then it was fairly obvious that I could do it. And I'm much of that opinion, which is if someone else can do something, then it is possible to do it. And if there's a possibility it can work, and I looked up the legality of it, and I wasn't breaking any laws by doing this, then I could go ahead. So I did, and I moved in. And 4 years down the road, it became immune from enforcement, which was fantastic. Um, and it's a nice place. I built a 4-bedroom cabin, so it was big enough for me, my wife, kids, if they wanted to come. As it was, one went off to university, one went somewhere else, and another moved to another part of the country, and it ended up with me and my wife. So she's managed to fill the cabin with 7 dogs, which
I guess if
which
you've got dogs, which is quite handy if you've got strange people coming on into
yes,
your
yes.
wood.
So I have 7 large dogs running around the place, which is fun, and they're great company. Um, and then so we had this cabin and this large woodland, and we started keeping chickens, rare breeds. So we built pens for the chickens, and we sell the eggs, some for eating, some for breeding. And we raise chickens, and we've got some turkeys now, and some ducks, and some quail. And then we started planting food. And within a relatively short period of time, you work yourself into a position where you don't really need a lot from outside. You do still go to the shop, obviously, but you can grow your own vegetables, and you can rear your own birds, which are good for eggs and meat, and you can live a lifestyle which is much more in tune with nature, without a doubt. My whole sort of view on everything changed when I moved here. Everything changed. I became much more in tune with the seasons, because they actually started to mean something.
Yes.
Like in the summer, I never need to use my generator, but in the winter months, I might have to turn it on for an hour. Different things. So the seasons actually start to mean things, whereas in modernity, in normal existence, they don't. You walk in, you turn lights on, you don't think about it. And I've had people say, yeah, but your water system froze one winter and you didn't have running water for 3 days. And they're right. That's happened a couple of times. And as much as it's a pain in the bottom, it's something you can get through. It's not a huge issue. But some people can't understand that. They don't understand that. You might have to run a generator for an hour in December because it's, you're not generating enough solar power to keep your house going. And they're right, you do. But the offset is, I've got no mortgage. I've got no rent to pay. It's given me the option of, do I continue to work the same amount of hours, or do I have more time to myself? Or do I have more time and maybe slightly less money, but I don't need a lot of money anymore because I've got no bills to pay. We run a rainwater collection system and a filtration system, so our water is free. My heating is done with a log burner, although I've got gas we do have central heating, but usually the gas is used for cooking. But that's not on grid, that's off grid, so that's propane. It's a much easier, it's a much more understandable way of life to my view. I think I best heard it described by, and I've forgotten her name, which is a shame. There was an old woman who lived in a caravan in the middle of Dartmoor, and she into her 90s, and she was interviewed by the BBC. And this BBC reporter strolled up, and he was there, and she said, I'll get the fire going so we can have a cup of tea. And she went outside and she collected some twigs and she got this fire started, and then put on some bigger logs, and then she put the kettle on and she poured the water out of a bucket that she'd collected the water in, and they waited 10 minutes and the kettle boiled and she made this cup of tea. And the reporter said, it's taken you nearly half an hour to make a cup of tea, and you had to go outside and collect those twigs, and you've obviously had to collect that water from the river down the bottom. Wouldn't it be easier if you just lived in a flat and you could just turn on the kettle? And she said, well, it did take me half an hour, but for you to live in that flat and just turn on that kettle, you have to work 40 hours a week, 6 days a week for the rest of your life. Mm-hmm. And I thought that kind of shows the difference between the two ways of living, because this has given me options that I didn't know existed before.
Yes, I can absolutely see that. It's funny because in my household, some people who've seen perhaps my older videos will know that I have I bought an Essie Ironheart, it's called, which is it's a kitchen range. I bought it with some inheritance
lovely
money.
Thing.
It is a beautiful thing, and I love it. And it's a wood-burning stove. I cook on it. It heats my water. If I wash my clothes, I hang them up in the kitchen, so people come around and they see my shirts and my pants and my socks and all of that, because it's usually overnight as the wood-burning stove is cooling down. Because I usually light it this time of year. I'll just probably light it about 5 or 6. And it's only on for about 4 hours, and then it's cooling down. But in that time, it's heated up my water. But the point I wanted to get to is, in order to, a bit like that lady, if I'm cooking a meal, I go out and I have logs, I chop up the kindling, I have to light the fire. It takes time, and I'm eating now organic food as much as I can. So I get the veg, and all that time I'm sort of preparing my food. It's my wind down from the day. So I may have been doing these interviews recently, as you know, and then in the evening, I just go no to the computer, no to the emails, which are continually coming in, and I just say, I'm sorry, I'm now in me time, and it's me, the Essie, the lovely Julia comes over, my partner, and she'll come and cook with me. We'll have a real conversation, which is fantastic, and then we'll get the kettle on, and and then when you eat that food, you feel like you've earned it, because it's taken you much longer, but you're part of it because you've had to, it's primeval.
Exactly the thing. It's a much more natural, understandable way of living. And if you've grown those vegetables,
that's the dream.
And they're your carrots and they're your potatoes.
Yes.
And you've reared the bird, and that's your chicken. And you've now prepared it. You cut the wood that you're cooking. You cut that a year ago. Mm. So it teaches you delayed gratification as well, which is something sadly lacking in today's society. Everything it has to be instant. It has to be now. And people have kind of lost that thing of, well, maybe if I do something now, it will be better in the future.
Yes.
And that's an important thing that we maybe need to relearn.
The moment of now is so important, and we're deferring it all the time. And then we've got these wretched things, which you find people, the moment that they've got suddenly free, they've switched straight on it, watching a video by some bald bloke interviewing somebody who lives in a cabin.
Interviewing another bald bloke. Looks like he's got my head on upside down. So that's really where I was. I actually came to the conclusion years ago that the system didn't work. It didn't work for me, and it certainly doesn't work today. Everything is broken. The health system we know is broken. If you try to get a doctor, you're onto a losing wicket. It doesn't work anymore. The education system, I know you've had people on talking about this. You had Mr. Curtin on the other day that touched on it. The education system really isn't fit for purpose anymore. Sadly to say, the policing system seems to be going the same way. They're very good at dancing the Macarena during a pride parade. But
they're brilliant,
but not that good at catching criminals when 96% of reported crimes go unsolved. So that's your criminal system, your education system, your health system don't work. And I could see this coming years ago and decided it really wasn't for me. I shut down my bank accounts. I used only cash. That was 20 years ago.
So
and
you
ended
don't
up.
you don't have a bank account now?
No, no, I don't.
How did
Um,
so
it's
you?
very difficult these days.
Yeah, I was going to say
Very
it must be. Yeah.
and becoming more difficult. And they know what they're doing.
Yes.
And they, but I've held out, and I still haven't got one. Um, I run a business as well, and that's cash only, which is rare these days.
Mm.
But everything seems to be working okay. I can still continue at the moment until this digital currency, which they're going to bring in, and all of these things that you've discussed on your channel. And I mean all of them: the currencies, the banking system, the education system, the 15-minute cities, the 20-minute neighborhoods. All of these things are going to happen, which is hideous. I don't think there's a political answer. I think there is a way, right, that people can do something. And I think that is to go back to a simpler way of life. It is simple, the way I live. It's really understandable. If I chop wood, I can heat my home. If I grow vegetables, I can share them with my friends. It's very simple. And I think you're going to find that in the next 2 decades, you're going to find a split in society. You're going to find people that are quite happy to go along with a digital ID and a digital currency, live in the 20-minute zone with no car and no access to anything else, to be quite honest. And that's what they would like. And you're going to find people that don't want that, that don't want that digital ID, that want a little bit of freedom, that want something else.
Mm.
And they're going to be living a much more simple life because they will be outside of the technological bubble, if you like. And they will be the smaller of the two groups. But I'm sure that split's going to happen because I know people that are walking away from it now.
Yes.
And that's been growing since what happened 3 years ago. That woke a lot of people up to the power of the system, if you would like. And it's not just governments. The governments were obviously taking their direction from above. They were all saying the same thing. And people started to notice this and wanted a way out. And over the last 2 years, I've helped individuals, so that's 20 families, do exactly the same as what I've done. And I've been working with several groups that wanted to do it on a larger scale. So you've got 15 to 20 people, some are single, some are families, and they want to get together, form a community, grow their own food, live on the land, and how we can do that. And there's ways you can do it. There are things you can do. They never make it easy, but there are things you can do without breaking rules or breaking laws. So I'm working with groups. And I was still, like yourself, Richard, being inundated with people saying, I can't even get to a woodland anymore. They've all been bought up. They've been bought up by a company that's actually chopping them all down. It's chopping the trees down, and that will be used for wood pellets for Dax power station that switched from coal to wood powered.
Yes. That's
Which
awful.
Yes, it is awful. Or the woodlands have all been bought by private owners like I did. And I understand this argument. But what I'm proposing now is we start a much bigger organization. And I've got it in motion, and we've got the company set up. And what we want to do is buy land throughout the United Kingdom. So in every county, we want to buy woodland, pasture land, farmland in every single county. And that land will be available for members of the club, members of the group to use for social activities, for taking your family out for a picnic, for camping. You want to take your son camping in the woods, there'll be a woodland you can use. It will be used for people that want to try homesteading, but aren't sure if it's their thing. because often you'll find people will put their life savings into buying a couple of acres, and they get there and they start growing, and they've built a cabin, and suddenly it's all too much, and now they don't know what to do because it's not really for them. So we want people to be able to try it. Some people don't want to live on the land, but they want to be able to maybe keep some chickens and a goat. So we're going to make that possible. But it all starts with people agreeing that if we don't own the land, we can't do anything.
Yes.
So, and it's with numbers we can do it. And I mentioned before that with 1,000 people who put in £1,000, we could buy £1 million worth of land tomorrow.
And what do you get? Yeah, I was going to say, what do you get for £1 million worth of land?
You'd be surprised. You'd be surprised. Like, I bought my 2 acres of woodland for 16,000.
Wow.
Now there's room here, right? For if we were talking about living, you'd probably get five people living here easy, with enough room to grow their own food and veg. And I've got fruit trees out the back and everything. But if you look for it, land is still available at reasonable prices, at £10,000 an acre. So you can start to see that you could, in each county, buy pasture land, you could buy grazing land, you could buy a piece of woodland. And 1 million is, when you're talking about land and that, it is small change. But when you're talking to an individual, if I said to you, Richard, it'd be a great idea if you could just let me have £1 million.
Yeah,
suddenly it's a huge amount of money. Yes.
Sorry, I just misplaced it somewhere.
And this is the problem most people have found, which is they would love to do something like I'm doing, or they'd love to try it, or they'd love to just be able to have somewhere they could go camping or hiking or go for a picnic that they know they're allowed to. That's the other thing. I mean, camping now is like, unless you're on a registered site, it's near impossible. You can't just camp in a field. You can't camp in a wood because they're all owned by people. So I think really what the idea of this whole initiative was to have, on a smaller scale, a national trust for the people. We would own this land and we'd use it for the good of the people. And by owning it, we can keep it out of the ownership of these global corporations.
Absolutely. No, it sounds amazing. And what you have described there, as you said, I can imagine a lot of people will be nodding either in total agreement, and some people will be going, oh my God, he's talking about going back to the Ark and living in caves and things like that. And so clearly that's not for them. But there's that middle ground that you've identified, in which some people will be thinking, actually, days out, a week away, going on holiday, getting back to nature for a while, and then coming back to the screens. Kids will be like, would never get the kids off the computers, but they might do it for a few days. That might be enough to, once people have sampled it.
You visited that little homestead the other day, the farm, and they've got a little club. And that's a brilliant idea. But if there was one in every county, like where you could actually, you could go along and you could have your little allotment, but then someone's got some fruit trees as well. Maybe you swap your carrots for some apples, and someone down there's actually keeping chickens in the corner, so you might be able to get some eggs. And if you can't swap because you want to keep all your potatoes, then buy your eggs from them instead of from Morrison's. And
exactly,
that's really what it's about. It's about being self-sufficient. And when you're self-sufficient and not reliant on the system, that's a great thing, because now they've got much less they can threaten you with. They can't really threaten. You see, they can't threaten me. I'm not scared of losing my job because I'm self-employed. They can't take away my house because I own it. The mortgage company can't do anything. They can't shut my bank account because I haven't had one for 20 years. And if they say I can't go in a shop because I'm not wearing a face mask, I don't care. Okay, I'll eat egg on toast with my own vegetables. It's not an issue. And more people are recognizing that if you're dependent on the system, you're going to end up having to do what they want you to do. So a little bit of drawing away from it and being a little bit self-sufficient actually is a fantastic safety net. The problem is people really can't afford to go and buy 2 acres of land.
Yes.
The way I'm talking about doing it is everybody chips in a small amount. So I had an old chap the other day who's in his 80s who was kind of overjoyed at the idea and said, I can put in £10 a week for 2 years, and that means I've put in £1,000. And he's dead right.
Yeah.
And if everyone did that, in 2 years, we would have £1 million. Now, I'm kind of hoping that comes a lot sooner than that.
Yes.
Because I know people that, have already said, look, I've got a little bit of money, not lots, but I can put in maybe £50 to £100 into this straight away. And the way we've decided to do it is that anyone who puts money in would be a shareholder. So you would own that land, not just the company. You would be a shareholder. So this is your land, not owned by a group or whatever. It's yours. You own shares in that. So you're totally permitted to use it. You're totally permitted to turn up at an annual general meeting and say, and vote on things on, we think this is a good idea. We think this is a good idea. What do you think about it? And have your say. And that's how it should be. It is our land.
And the idea of a community, I think, is brilliant because I don't know. Are you familiar with? Is it John Seymour who wrote Self-Sufficiency in the 70s? I think it was.
Yeah, great book.
I've read it, and his other book as well, which I've read. And he goes back to the land. He used to be on a boat. He used to do sailing and stuff, and lived on a boat. And he went to farmland. He bought this farm, I think in Norfolk it was, completely away from everything, no electricity, no nothing, with his family. And he managed to sort of survive. But he said, in an ideal world, it would be great if there are other people. So you might keep pigs, but as you said, and somebody else has got chickens. So you're trading between each other or just supporting each other and say, look, we're going to slaughter this pig. We can't eat all of it. We can salt some of it down and do this and do that to it. But it would be great to be able to, exchange. And you've got this amazing community and people are learning their skills in different areas, and you've got reasons then to help one another and come together and celebrate certain events and as you say,
I've already started like with individuals and families. So 20 in the last 2 years have now got their own homesteads, and they're working together. They swap ideas. What's the best way to handle water? What's the best way to build this? How can I do that? On my YouTube channel, the comments are filled with this. And again, it carries over onto the Telegram channel as well. And it's the great community. That's what I found is the comments on the YouTube channel. And it got to a point where I can't answer all of them. But I tend to, pick out those ones that are really interested in certain aspects and point them in the right direction. It's an idea that has come of time. There's that many people contact me and saying, I've got to do something. And I think everybody recognizes that something needs to be done. And if you can't see yourself, I can't see a political party changing anything. No. I've been involved in politics and smaller parties and mainstream political parties. I was in the Conservative Party. I've had dinner with Margaret Thatcher. So I know how it works at the top. And I can tell you for now, there's no difference between a Tory and a Labour and a Liberal MP. There's none. These people are best friends behind the scene. What you see in the House of Commons is a charade. 2 minutes later, they're having a drink in the bar and a barbecue in each other's gardens. It's a joke. So politics is not going to change the system. The system is there to save itself.
Yes. Absolutely. I know, and I've been saying this. I mean, I've been saying it in my monologues that we've got to make all that lot irrelevant because they're just not on our side. And,
Yes.
and people still have been so indoctrinated in the idea, well, maybe if we could vote for this party, they would change things. The whole system is wrong.
Yeah,
The whole
exactly
system.
that. So what we need to do, and this worries some people when I say this, oh, now you're really out there. We need to create an alternative society.
Yes, I agree with you.
And that, and people say, but that's never worked. And actually, you're dead wrong. You're really wrong. I can point to 3 that are working at the moment, and 1 that took control of the country. So the 3 that are working at the moment, you've got the Amish community and the Mennonites, very similar. And in the UK, you have the traveling community.
Yes.
Now, all 3 of those have their own culture. They have their own rule system. They live a separate existence within society without breaking rules. And the one that took control, there's a thing, and this is worth some of your listeners might be interested, and check up at what happened in Czechoslovakia. When the communists took over the Czech Republic, the people formed a separate alternative society. And that ran for years. They formed their own films, their own literature, their own newspapers. They had land they could go to. They even came up with their own currency. And in the end, the communists couldn't fight it. The whole Russian army couldn't fight the whole society. So they pulled out. And the government that was put in place in the 1980s were the people that ran that alternative society. And it was called the Velvet Revolution because no shots were fired. What they did, instead of fighting the communists, instead of trying to do what everybody does in the situation normally, instead of protesting and fighting against it, they simply turned away and walked in the opposite direction and carried on doing what they wanted to do without breaking any rules. And there was nothing they could do about it.
Absolutely. You're so talking my language. Yes, absolutely. And this is the problem is we've been, as I said earlier, we've been so indoctrinated. We think that this is the only thing, that there's, we're in a bubble and we don't realize there is life outside this bubble. We're trying to make the bubble and everything inside it work. And all you have to do is step outside the bubble and make your own bubble.
That's exactly it.
Do your own thing.
Exactly.
And people just think, oh, no, we've got to get this government because this is how it's always been. It can't possibly work, and the history. And the thing is, it is simple. You just have to pull your trousers up, roll up your socks and step out.
We do this in most other situations, which is the weird thing. If you were in a party and you were standing with a group of people that you didn't like, and they were saying things that you were completely opposed to, you might try to interject once or twice and put your point forward. But if they just bulldozed you and carried on saying what they were doing and acting in ways that you didn't like, you wouldn't stay there.
No, why?
You'd literally turn around and walk away.
Yes,
and this is the problem we've got with the system, and I say the system because it's more than the government. It's like all of the governments, all of the civil service, all of the everything together,
and the corporations that are all making, they're all making money from it. Independence is being wiped away.
Yes, and the thing is, it's going to get worse. I think most people recognise that. Most people see where they want it headed, which is a very restrictive, highly surveilled, and there's reasons they're doing it. Employment's going to be massively reduced by AI. Anyone who understands how AI works understands that. They're looking, even by their figures, at 70% of employment will be massively hit by AI. So when you've got a massive unemployment problem, that's when things like UBI have to come in. But governments can't afford to do this. If people are unemployed, they can't tax them. If you can't tax the people, you've got no money to spend. So there's reasons why they're putting in these control measures now, because relatively soon, that if they didn't, they might not be able to control the public. So they're trying to get people used to much lower standards of living. So use a heat pump, which don't work. So you're cold. Don't eat meat. You eat this stuff made of, I don't know.
Synthetic nonsense, yes.
Yeah, insects and rubber bouncy balls, whatever it is. It's and it's all going in a rather horrible direction. And the thing is, you could get 1,000 of us together waving banners and protesting. That's not going to stop them. It's really not.
Yes. No.
I've seen millions of people on a march, millions, and it doesn't make any iota of difference if they've made up their mind what they're doing.
No.
And you may have small victories along the way. You may. But you can guarantee that the people in power are in power, and they will do what they want to do. It's fairly easy to see. All we can do is start again, and I've got no problem with that because I've done it, and I know it's not scary. It is scary to other people, but that's why,
But they're not alone, are they? I mean, that's the whole point. What you're suggesting there is you're not just walking out of the house with some bags and living on the verge of society. You're actually living with other people who have done it and are there to help you, because it's in everybody's interest. If you've got a speciality, if you've done a thatching course, for example, and you can put some reeds together, you think, blimey, you're going to be welcome, because there's going to be plenty of people who want, we'll get you to do that. And do you know what?
The wealth of knowledge in the general population is vast. Everybody I've met, right, on my YouTube channel, the people I've met in real life that come from there, are intelligent, they're hardworking, they have a history, they have life experience, and they want to share that. Yeah. And that's what community is. And when you get 15, 20 people like that, normal people like you and me, who just say, do you know what, I'm just not keen on what's happening. I would rather have a simpler life surrounded by people like me, right, where we can try and do our best to get by. Yeah. And that doesn't mean, I mean, people think when I say I live off grid in the middle of the woods, they picture this kind of ramshackled sort of shed, and I'm dressed in sort of rags and I'm a hobo. And then they come here, and I've got a 4-bedroom home, which is 20,000 square foot, with a Smeg fridge, freezer, a microwave, a tumble dryer, a washing machine. Because I've got a wife, and you have to have those things, otherwise they kill you. So just because I'm off grid doesn't mean you have to live some weird existence. I live a normal life.
You don't have to live in a shanty town.
No.
Exactly.
No, you don't. But some people, I mean, I know other people that live off grid who live much simpler lives than me, with no electricity, and they quite like that. And I've got nothing against that at all. But it is each to their own, and we should be allowed to do that. And that's my point, is all of this begins, right, if we get together and do something. And the only way we can do this is if we own that land. And then we've got options. If we don't own it, we can't do anything. We can't do anything. In fact, I can tell you, because I've been doing this for 2.5 years, like looking at land and buying land with people, the prices are going up daily. Big corporations are putting it out of the reach of most people. And that's going to get worse. So we need to do it in the next, I would say, within the next 3 years. We would need enough land, which is why it has to be done now.
Simon, I'm coming down to visit your wonderful place in a couple of days, and with your permission, it would be great to demonstrate exactly what you're saying and doing, filming a little bit.
Yeah, no problem.
and put that out so that people get a sense of what it can be like. I'm sure that a number of people watching are going, yeah, he's just talking my language, as I am. Some people, I'm sure, will be thinking, this sounds interesting, I'd love to know more. And of course, I've got links to your YouTube channel as well, so they can find out more. But also, I think there'll be some people going, okay, well, we'd like to visit. And if I can do a little early visit and show just, the sense of it, so that then we get people on board and going, actually, get the wife in and the kids and saying, look, what do you think? Could we do this? We've got a little bit of savings.
And literally, I wouldn't want, that old chap I spoke of just now, who said I can put in £10 a week. I was like adamant, hang on a minute, like that sounds like that's your last £10 a week. And he said, no, this is £10 I would usually spend on something else. I don't want anyone to put money in, right, if they've got no money. This is pointless. But I know from experience, right, that a lot of people, right, would think nothing of spending £50 to £100 on a night out.
Yes.
Really, they wouldn't. That if the exhaust fell off their car, they'd have to go and pay £400 in the garage to have a new exhaust done. My argument is, okay, your exhaust hasn't fallen off. Just for this month, imagine that it had, okay? And put half that amount into something that's going to make the future for all of us better. And this is the only obstacle I see, which is, am I getting personal benefit? Well, yes, you are, right? But it's also of benefit for everyone else. And that's a new concept for a lot of people. But I think we need to collectivize. If we don't come together, right, one person waving a stick at a tank does nothing, right? 1 million people standing in front of that tank stops it dead. So we need to do it together.
I couldn't have put it better. Simon, I'm going to wrap up now because unfortunately I've got to go. But I'm looking forward to coming along. This is very much what Julia and I have been itching to do. And if it wasn't for the fact that the channel suddenly went a bit ballistic and people have been interested in all the guests and stuff, we're actively trying to find somewhere. So it's going to be amazing to have that conversation with you more, to make a little film about it and try and get more people on side, because I'm so behind what you're saying. This is so clearly obvious that, and I've been saying this in the show, we've got to take back responsibility for ourselves. We've had these government bodies being more and more our parents and holding our hands and doing everything for us, to the point that we will soon have, as you so rightly said, AI will take away our even reason to be here, because all the jobs will be done. And then what are you going to do? And to me, and I know from, as I described, just making a meal through using my Essie to heat it up and all that, the way of life of slowing down, being in the moment, being back with nature, and not having the stress of most things, and having a community again around you in which you can laugh and joke and celebrate and moan and groan and grumble and all those sort of things, and just ask for help when you need it, especially with children. If you've got children and you're setting up, because you could all set up your own schools and things like that, educate at home away from the system. There's so much that I think speaks to the soul in what you're saying, that people are going to be extremely awakened by this concept, because we've had our eyes closed and led and pushed and directed and funneled, and it's time to get off that train and look,
do something.
And do something.
And just to finish, I understand that some people are really into the money thing, some people are into the education thing, some people are into the natural law thing, and all of those things are great, right? They all are, and they all count. But if we don't come together and do something, nothing is going to change. What will happen is what they're planning will overtake us, and then you'll have no choice. And this is a way we can bring all of that together. So once we've got all this land, we can start looking at, okay, should we have our own laws in these places? Should we go back to this? Should we have our own currency? Should we do? now we can start talking about all those different aspects, about all those different things that you've covered on nearly every one of your shows. But you've got to have something to pull the people together. And I'm hoping, right, that this initiative, I mean, the feedback I've had so far has been phenomenal. And the only thing slowing it down is the amount of security I've had to have built into the website, which is going to take a couple of weeks. But once that's launched, then yeah, it's ready to go. I know what, I'll shut up because I'll waffle on for another hour, mate.
Well, we're coming down. We'll find out more. We'll show the viewers a lot more. Simon, thank you so much. I'll put the links in the description, ladies and gentlemen. We've whetted your attitude. We've whetted your appetite. And so go and check out Simon's YouTube channel and read the comments of what other people think. And I think this is an amazing opportunity because it's really people keep saying to me, Richard, it's all very talking about stuff. We've got to do something. We've got to get off our bums and we've got to do something. And this is it.
Richard, before I go, I know you've mentioned this on your channel, and I've mentioned it as well. And it's nothing to do with the land or the initiative or whatever. We've both spoken about Clive.
Oh yes, Clive
Freeman, and I know most of your viewers have been kind of horrified, the same as mine have, about his predicament. His health has taken a turn for the worst. The petition is going well, but we could still do with maybe just anyone who's listening now who hasn't signed it, just to sign that petition.
I'll put a link. I'll put a link in the description. Absolutely.
The rules are wrong. The rules are wrong. When an innocent man has to lie, things need to change.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll put a link to videos that I've got on his situation for those who might have come to this and thought, what are you talking about? It's well worth checking it out. A man who's been in prison for 30 years for a crime he didn't commit. It's pretty obvious from all the evidence that he didn't commit it. He's been in prison now longer than he would have been in if he had admitted it, which he didn't need to admit. And he's not very well now, and it's likely that he'll die in prison. And wouldn't it be a wonderful and noble thing to be able to get him out so that he can have the last, however long he's got, away, and maybe come and visit
Definitely.
in the field, see what freedom. I mean, he's missed so much. It is just heart-rending to think anybody should be in prison, and there are others in the similar situation, and this would help change the law, not just for him but for others in that situation. And so the petition is then there. No, thank you so much. I was going to mention that, but I appreciate you mentioning it.
No,
Simon.
Thank you.
So there you go, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so much for watching another brilliant interview, inspirational. And we will be back. I will be back with Simon. The lovely Julia will be with me, visiting your wonderful homestead. And in the meantime, there are more interviews to be done here on this channel. Until next time, from Simon and I, goodbye.